I'm glad that you're here, and I'm happy everybody's here. Hello again, and welcome. The very first thing that we should talk about when I'm trying to explain philosophy or talk about philosophy for people is that, well, what is philosophy? So what does that thing study? What is the domain? So let's watch this video first. It's a 30-second clip, and then we will talk about the meaning of it and what is philosophy. So yeah.
To me, nature is the, I don't know, spiders and bugs and then big fish eating little fish and plants eating plants and animals eating. It's like an enormous restaurant. That's the way I see it.
Yes, but if God created it, it has to be beautiful, even if his plan's not apparent to us at the moment.
Sonia, what if there is no God?
Boris Dmitrovich, are you joking?
What if we're just a bunch of absurd people who are running around with no rhyme or reason?
But if there is no God, then life has no meaning. Why go on living? Why not just commit suicide?
Well, let's not get hysterical. I could be wrong. I'd hate to blow my brains out and then read in the papers they found something.
Boris, let me show you how absurd your position is. All right, let's say that there is no God and each man is free to do exactly as he chooses. Well, what prevents you from murdering somebody?
Well, murder's immoral.
Immorality is subjective.
Yes, but subjectivity is objective.
Not in an irrational scheme of perception.
Perception is irrational. It implies immanence.
But judgment of any system or a priori relation of phenomena exists in any rational or metaphysical or at least epistemological contradiction to an abstracted empirical concept such as being or to be or to occur in the thing itself or of the thing itself.
Yeah, I've said that many times.
Boris, we must believe in God.
If I could just see a miracle. Just one miracle. If I could see a burning bush or the seas part or my Uncle Sasha pick up a check.
I wanna hear your comments. Even those in chat, if you want to speak, just raise your hand. I want to hear your comments. What did we just listen? What kind of conversation is that?
Yeah, well, in particular, I used to always say that I believe that morality is objective myself, but I now understand that it isn't. It doesn't change my feelings about what's moral and what is, but I get the difference now between objective and subjective, I think.
Okay, and did the conversation itself make sense to you? So were you able to follow from beginning to end? Did it sound like something worthwhile of your time to listen to that conversation? What I want to hear is Ben's opinion about this, because what I'm planning to do, Ben, is to give you a red buzzer whenever you hear word salad. What do you call it? Word salad? Whenever you hear word salad, I want you to press that buzzer and say, this is not up to my liking. So when you heard that conversation, what were you able to follow it? Did you like it? Was it up to your standard?
Well, we all used to like Woody Allen.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't. Word salad would be the right word. After the first half, word salad.
And I completely agree. This is word salad. This is a popular, kind of the type of discussion. This is a popular cadence that people associate with doing philosophy. So you just talk about the existence of God and about morality, and then you wish-wash your way through. If you hear me doing this during today or any other day, please stop me. Especially you, Ben. You have the buzzer, all right? I'm not saying the conversation was completely meaningless. There was something about it, but the way it was delivered, the method it was delivered, was not to the point. It was more like emotional than trying to make a point. Philosophy, as far as I understand it, is the opposite. It's about avoiding the wishy-washy and getting to the point. So what is actually philosophy? If you turn to slide 3, I got a bunch of quotes from famous philosophers attempting to define what is it that they do. First of all, the Greek, as the Greek word philosophia, as you all know, I guess, Philos means love, and then Sophia means wisdom, and so the whole domain means seeking wisdom, all the love of the wisdom, of the appreciation of being clever or doing arguments, and all of that fall under that category. The man himself, Socrates, said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." So when he does philosophy, what he's trying to do is examine his life. Right? He sits down and examines life. Plato says philosophy begins in wonder. So for him, every time you're wondering about something, every time you're thinking, you're doing philosophy. Epicurus, my man, we will have a certain time, explaining Epicurus. He's an incredible character. Let no one delay the study of philosophy while young, nor weary of it when old. So you have to start as young as you can and then continue doing it. You're never tired of doing philosophy, because for those people, for the Greeks, this is about thinking. So any thinking at the time, any process of analysis, any process of not thinking about food was philosophy. And then you move on later, and of course there's a huge gap here, but we will bridge it as we do these rooms more often. Science is organized knowledge, wisdom is organized life. So you see, after a while, Immanuel Kant start talking about science here. So it's kind of emerged out of the womb of philosophy, this sort of thing. And then Friedrich Nietzsche, he says, he who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. So it's a little bit dark from Friedrich Nietzsche. He's like, philosophy is the reason we live, right? It's kind of different here. Still not what we're talking about. Philosophy, Bertrand Russell, of course, philosophy is to be studied not for the sake of any definite answers to its questions, since no definite answers can, as a rule, be known to be true, but rather for the sake of the questions themselves. I think this quote is responsible for Ben's reaction, because Bertrand Russell affirms, without proving it anywhere, that as a rule, as a matter of fact, you cannot answer the questions of philosophy. And this drives people away. This, like, what are we doing? Are we wasting time here? Am I just gonna spend time listening to some dude talking and then the other dude replying with no absolute benefit or conclusion at the end? And then Ludwig Wittgenstein, of course, the hero of all of this sort of school of thought, he says philosophy is a battle against the bewitchment of our intelligence by means of language. This is a little bit particular to Wittgenstein. I'm not going to dive into Wittgenstein's philosophy of language here, but what I want to say is that he thinks that there's a big confusion, and then philosophy is just this battle, and then there's our intelligence, and then language is kind of untangling the mess in our intelligence, so to say. And then one of my favorite peoples alive, Alain de Botton, he says, philosophy's task is to bring our thoughts and intuition to the level of coherence and clarity so that we can make better decisions. This sounds a little bit better, except if you look at what Socrates said, and you can immediately see that he's saying the exact same thing, but with different words, which also drives people away from philosophy, because if a domain has been studied from 2,000 years before Christ till today, so that's what, 4,000 or 5,000 years of philosophy already, with no progress to be seen, this kind of means that it is useless. So I spoke a lot. I want to leave the room now for people to say whatever they want to say about these quotes. If there's a particular quote you like or dislike, or you want to argue, let's hear that. Let's hear that remark or discussion.
So let's look through the quotes. I do think the last one is the most useful. I don't think I agree with the intuition bit. I think you get intuition through experience, and I don't think philosophizing is going to give you intuition, but I do like the pursuit of clarity of thought. So that's as far as I've got. Definitely think that they get better as they go through, and I think that clarity of thought is a great pursuit. So yeah, that's all I've got to say.
Yeah, and I think it's really, I mean, I love having these quotes from all of these names because I haven't studied philosophy, so I don't know when people will refer to Wittgenstein or somebody else. and they're kind of how they differ from somebody else. And I can't make those distinctions, but it's wonderful having the quotes and the progression where science kind of comes in into the mix. But also, of course, the big vacuum. Were there no philosophers in the Middle Ages that we
Oh,
know the names
that's
of?
my fault. That's my fault because I wanted to put the famous characters on board, and then the people in the Middle Ages got smudged. But we will cover them. That's on me. That's on me. That's my bad. But yeah, so I'm trying to lay out the grounds here for. I guess you kind of picked it up from my tone. What I really want to do is to lay some intuitive or some cultural, how to say, this is how people understand it, right? This is the popular opinion about philosophy. If you show anybody these quotes, he's going to look at this and say, well, this is kind of useless, this is kind of a waste of time. I'm going to try today to answer this. I want to do two things before I continue. Number one is welcome everybody who has joined us. Good to see you here. I love that you are here. Very welcome. You have two options to follow the slides. Either click on the link above for Jitsi and leave Clubhouse running in the background so that you can hear the audio from Clubhouse and then watch my screen on Jitsi. Or you can scroll up above in the chat and then find the slides as a PDF. Or you can just listen on Clubhouse if you prefer audio only. I don't recommend it, though. The slides are quite nice. The other thing is to read the quote that I can't find it anymore. Did you delete it? It's a quote from Wittgenstein. Oh, yes, I found it. My goal is to show the fly out of the bottle. Yes, that's another quote. And Wittgenstein is one crazy, crazy dude. And yeah, so far so good, or so bad, actually. And John was talking about science emerging and progressing, all the lack thereof, I think, of progress. There was no progress between Socrates and Alain right here. So what is the modern understanding, or at least my understanding, what I believe philosophy should be about? The first name I'm going to drop here, and I dropped quite a few, but the first name I'm going to keep dropping is Stefan Toulmin. Stefan Toulmin is a linguist. He's a philosopher. He taught English, and he devised a certain model for argumentation. And that model was loved by almost every department of philosophy and English around the world. They keep using it. And from that model emerged the popular, names for the what do you call them? Logical fallacies. So this is where we get them from. All of this is due to this man and others. And I'm not going to delve into him today, but I just want to put this picture here to just explain what is it that I mean when I talk about philosophy. Every argument, according to Toulmin, is a journey between the grounds and the claim you want to prove. So you make a claim, and you're trying to prove this claim by the end, and you are relying on certain grounds to prove that claim. So, for example, my claim is that it has rained already. And my grounds, or my premises, if you want to call them, is that I look around and I see that the streets are wet. So because the streets are wet, I will say, conclusion, it has probably rained. It has most probably rained. And I put most probably in italics because you have to keep in mind that the streets could be wet for some other reason. But since the streets everywhere are wet, as I observe, it cannot be someone washing their car wetting all the streets. So it probably, most probably, right, in a reasonable amount, in a reasonable way, it has rained. Now, you will see that there is a word in yellow on that line. And that word, it says warrant. When I say the streets are wet, and then I go to conclude that it has most probably rained, I'm not making, like most people assume or are comfortable with, a reasonable journey. This does not lead to that immediately. Now, it leads to that in our intuition and in our mind because we are familiar with the physical universe. We are familiar with our planet and how it rains and what happens every time it rains. But then we are assuming that when it rains, the streets are wet. This is a hidden assumption. We are assuming that every time it rains, it's the same rain. Maybe it's a different rain this time, and maybe this time, the streets are wet for some other reason. You don't know. You're assuming all of these things. You're assuming that the universe is still working the way it does. And that assumption we're going to call warrant. A warrant basically is a hidden assumption in any discussion. I claim, first of all, every discussion that spirals out of control, if you're ever on Clubhouse and you hear people, spiraling out of control, or if you hear politicians discussing and spiraling out of control, if they're not lying, if they are being very faithful, mostly if you dig into it, the problem will be in the hidden assumption I'm calling warrant here. There are hidden assumptions that have not been stated in the argument, and those are the ones causing the disagreement. And what is philosophy? Philosophy is the search for this. Philosophy is, I put the picture on the right, at least in my understanding, your theory, so your grounds and your claims and your logic, etc. Your theory is this vessel. Your theory is this ship. And the ship cannot sail without those warrants. And those warrants cannot be controlled by the ship itself. The warrants control the ship. Your ship will be under the mercy of the sea you choose to sail. If you have a very violent sea, you will sink. And if you plan to sail into very shallow waters and you bring the wrong vessel, so this is a very big ship, right? It will just hit the ground. It will not sail. Whereas if you choose a very small boat on a very deep sea, on a very violent sea, you will also sink. So there's a coupling between, so to say, the philosophy or the warrant, the universe you choose to be in. I shouldn't say that word, actually. It's confusing. How can I express this idea? The space that you choose to exist in, and for your theory to exist in, to operate in, and the theory itself. There's this hidden coupling that people don't often pay a lot of attention to. And this is what philosophy is. It's that background, it's that base, it's that sea where the theory sails. And we will see how it happens in a minute. I'll just shut up now and then ask for questions, remarks, clarifications, anything you want to talk about.
So you haven't talked, I think, yet about the second thing there, which has no explicit grounds.
What do you mean the second thing which has no explicit grounds?
Well, the second thing on that page, you have a warrant, but there's no explicit grounds indicated. Right, for the
you mean the one below? Oh yeah, because I'm following the slideshow here, so I haven't even revealed the bottom part. If you're on the PDF, you see the whole page. Yeah. If you're on the PDF, you see the whole page.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good.
Never mind.
Yeah, that's a good remark, actually. So in the future, when I'm doing animations, I should split the slides if people are following on PDF. Okay, so we're talking only about the top part of the PDF, the first grounds to claim sort of line. The second one here that John is referring to is a test. So we're gonna start practicing this right here, right now. So if you're following on the Jitsi, you will see a new line now appearing, and you will see the word claim, and the claim is a falling feather cannot split a rock in two. This is the claim. This is my claim. Okay, and I want to ask you guys to name some grounds for that claim. First of all, you can say I don't believe it, but if you do, if you have grounds to support that claim, please let me know what the ground would be.
I can imagine circumstances in which it would break a rock, actually, but I think the general objection would be there's not enough. An objection would be there's not enough energy in the falling rock, in the falling feather to break a rock. But if the rock was right on the verge of breaking, a feather could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. So, I mean, I don't think it's a statement of fact that a feather can't break a falling rock. I mean, there's lots of other ways in which a feather could break a falling rock, of course, because, a feather could break what did you say, a falling rock or just a rock? I haven't got the Jitsi in front of me. A falling feather could break a rock.
Yeah. So if you just let the feather go down, it could break a rock. And then, of course, you can say, oh, this is not all the time. So we need more details. So one of the objection is, which is quite right, we need more details. And then even when we provide more details, you're going to say, oh, but wait, this still doesn't have enough energy. Or you would say, well, this has never happened before. Why would it happen now? You can have all those grounds listed here, right? About what we know about the physics of it, and what we know about the mass and the energy and the gravity and how things break and how things interact. You can start listing the entire thing here. Many grounds to support that claim. And then you can say, oh, I don't want to support it, I want to refute it, in which case you still have to do the same work. So you're going to have to start listing all your grounds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. What would be the warrant here? What would be a hidden assumption that we still haven't tackled, or usually people don't tackle?
I mean, I think there are lots potentially. One is that you're talking about the feather directly breaking the rock. You could have a guy stood there with a hammer or whatever, a hammer that can break the rock, who's
Yeah.
instructed that when he sees the feather falling, that he breaks the rock.
Let's fix the scenario that you just have okay, so I did not think that this would be an issue. So the example I had in mind is you have a feather in your hand and the rock is below, and then you just leave it drop in free fall. That was the example I have in my head. Not that you put the feather on the rock and then you hit it with a hammer. Not to say that this is
No,
not a realistic scenario.
I wasn't saying that, but that's yet another one. But I'm saying that you could have the rock on the floor. You could have a sniper, let's say, at a distance, whose instruction is that when he sees a feather approaching the rock, he shoots the rock with a sniper rifle.
Yeah, but then how
So
would
now
you
the
know?
feather is indirectly breaking the rock.
I see what you have in mind. Okay, so let's yeah, this is one way of saying not enough details. So not enough. Okay, what's another thing that we still have not tackled?
I was thinking of the definition of the word feather.
The definition of a feather. Okay, that's still under not enough details. I will provide that definition for you. It is what you pluck out of a bird, and it has a shape. How do I describe a feather, actually? That's kind of difficult. You put me under the spot here. It's just a bird's feather, dude. Come on.
Well, it has something to do with language. That's all. That's what I was
It
thinking.
does. You're
Okay.
absolutely right. So this falls also under not enough details. So you need to ask the guy who's making this claim, can you give me all the details about your feather, all the details about your rock, what's the height, what's the energy, what's the velocity of
Okay.
that
So
rock
let's
dropping,
assume
what's the air
that
temperature,
is
all
fine.
of those.
Okay. Fair enough.
And I don't know, Shamash, I don't know if this, I don't know if you're going to this, but I'm still thinking about the question I asked before. And I think the difference between this example and the previous one is that the previous one is you're making a claim based on something unusual. And in this one, you're just making a general claim. And so there's no grounds. The first one needed grounds because you were making an unusual claim, whereas this one doesn't, because everybody will agree that's just a claim about feathers and rocks in general. Is that
Well, I don't see
does
the
that get into
distinction you're
anything?
I don't see the distinction you're drawing. Maybe you can expand.
Well,
The streets are very observable, so as feathers and rocks, and this is
right,
something that you would see every day as well. I don't see the
so in the first you're claiming, you're saying it must have rained recently, or it must have rained or something like that,
yeah.
right? Well, that's not generally true, right? Not at all generally true. You need something that you must be referring to. Whereas when you say a falling feather cannot break a rock, that's for most people would say, well, yeah, duh, right?
Well, how
So
about we saw feathers uh, falling from a tree onto a rock? That we actually have physical proof of observing feathers uh, having fallen from a tree. Say a bird gets killed and the feathers fall, and we've actually seen it. We've seen the road is wet, and we've seen feathers on the rock. Is that a premise
I
that
think
we can?
Shamash is trying to get to other categories of possible warrants, and I think he's got a catch-all of like not enough detail, And I'm definitely interested in what the next and from the way he's talking, it sounds like there are other categories.
Oh,
And it is an
definitely. There's billions.
billions. Oh, if there's
Oh,
billions,
yeah.
I'm not interested again. But if you've got a
No,
handful
there's
of
a big one.
categories,
There's a major one. There's a major one that we often neglect. And the major one is, for example, the belief that the firm trust that all of us in this room now, when we were discussing, oh, give me the mass of the feather, give me the definition of the feather, give me the street, give me the thing, you all believe that the laws of physics previously discovered will apply on this problem. Nobody has said, oh, wait a minute, what ship, what sea are we sailing in here? Are we operating under normal conditions? No, you know, like, does everything we know before apply? You just assumed it. Okay, this is where philosophy lies, right here. When you discover this hidden assumption that, now I can ask you, why would you believe that? And can you prove this claim, actually?
I don't think you can ever prove it, but there's never been any
No.
reason not to believe that. You go about science with that belief, and it continues to work. So, philosophy is just about exploring the realm in which the laws of physics don't apply. Then it might be useful for discussing a virtual world, like a video. I can be a video game character, and you can ask this question, and somebody could go in and they can do what they like, right? The person who wrote the game can change the game world however they like, and it may not. The feather may or may not break the rock. All bets are off. But yeah, I'm just getting, it sounds a little metaphysical to me now.
Oh,
That's exactly the word I was thinking. Metaphysical, yes.
But you're running way ahead of me, both of you, because what we will discover like 2 or 3 lectures ahead is that's exactly what science does. It's just another game. All right. I'm not going to try to defend this claim here today. All I'm going to say is to invite you to imagine that the actual, your objection applies also to science. It's just another game where we set the parameters. Okay, and I cannot prove it now. I have a lot of quote unquote warrants or premises or whatever to go through before we get there.
Okay, so you've got 2 major buckets so far. You've got a give me more details objection to whatever, and you've got a the rules of the game are stable over time type objection. Are there any other categories?
Oh, sure. I can name a few if you'd like, but I would also invite the room to try to come up with the hidden assumptions in this very simple situation. One of the hidden assumptions here could be that we can already know what will happen before, or we cannot know. So everybody who tried to answer this question without actually doing the experiment has made the assumption that you can access the truth of this experiment of this situation without actually doing the experiment. One person can say, oh, you would never know. You're going to have to actually get the feather you're talking about, not any feather, but the feather you're talking about, the rock you're talking about, and actually do it. And then you can really know what happens. That's a major choice between 2 philosophies here. My point is not the rocks and the feathers. I hope this is clear by now. My point is to show what a warrant is, to explain what the deep layer of our understanding of the world is, which I'm calling the subject of study of philosophy.
Why do you use the word warrant? Why new words when we could? What's the difference between that and just an assumption?
Because a warrant is. Oh, you're asking what's the difference between a warrant and assumption, not warrant of philosophy. Okay.
I'm just saying, what's the value in using the word warrant that we all have to get used to when we could just say assumption, that we all think we know what it means?
Because grounds could be assumptions as well, and they are different in nature. Grounds are how to say, they are stated clearly. They are not implicit. They are tacit. They're not tacit. They are explicit. But warrants are often hidden in the conversation. They are tacit and they are taken for granted. Grounds you can discuss. I can, if you tell me, well, that doesn't have enough energy, we can go and discuss this.
Okay,
but
so
I cannot discuss
just an explicit assumption, and a warrant is an implicit assumption.
More. The grounds can be negotiated over. Warrants are warrants. You're going to have to agree to this before we start the conversation. If you don't agree that the laws of physics previously discovered will apply, I don't have a conversation with you. I cannot even start. Where will I start? I ask about the energy, I ask about the details, I ask about, you don't believe that anything we discovered before will apply in this situation. How can I start the conversation with you? This is where the word warrant comes from. it's kind of a bounty. It's a price you have to pay before you enter the conversation. It warrants that the conversation can continue, whereas grounds can be discussed.
It's a stipulation.
Stipulation, yes, stipulation works. I'm only using the word because I'm paying homage to Stefan Toulmin here. If you don't like the word and you get the meaning, I'm not married to the word. Choose any other word you like. I'm just trying to, stick to the actual theory. Yes, John.
So I'm still stuck a little bit on the really obvious difference between these two examples, which is that one of them has no grounds.
One of them has no grounds. Which one? You mean? I did not put grounds on the slide, but the grounds can be named by the audience. I left it blank so that the audience can name it. Is this what you're talking about?
It is. I somehow thought you were. Somehow I expected that to be an important thing.
Oh no, I left it blank on purpose, and if you were following the Jitsi, I can click and then things would appear as we discuss them, because I don't want people to read the answer before discussing. You know what I mean?
And it's why I was struggling to come up with a difference between the two examples, and the difference I came to was that since the second one didn't have grounds, it didn't need something like an observation. Oh, the streets are wet. Oh, it must have rained, right? The second one is just falling feathers can't break rocks. You don't need to, right? It's a very different kind of a thing because it's just a general statement about feathers and rocks. Whereas the first one is talking about, here's a situation right now, the streets are wet. And therefore, to me, that's a big difference.
Yeah, that's sadly on me. I should have noticed that I should put the thing as a text. But if you're following on the Jitsi, I wrote it with my pen. So I wrote no energy and not enough information and all that stuff as objections. But again, the main point I'm trying to make is to explain what a warrant is. It's not about the actual feather and whatever. I tried to pick in my mind a simple example, and Yen Ben thankfully made it, very much more complicated than it needs to be.
But so far, it's good that you've defined this thing of warrant, which I'm calling in my head an implicit assumption. Grounds, I'm calling an explicit assumption. It's on the table. I know that's slightly oversimplified, but it's good enough for me for now. And you've identified two categories of warrant, one of which is not enough details, more details, please, and another is I'm calling it the stability of the rules over time. I don't know what your proper word is for it. That's all I've got from it so far. And what I'm hungry for is the next category, because what I want is a checklist of categories of implicit assumptions that I can quickly go through, preferably no more than a handful, to mentally check off and see, are there any details missing? Are there any are we assuming something about the rules over time? Because, for example, you could be discussing a video where a feather has fallen, and you may have seen the video before and you know damn well the feather breaks the rock, so you already know the answer. So there's something about time and causality and stability of rules over time, and there's definitely something about more details. I'm looking for the other big buckets.
Oh, I gave you one already about whether you can actually know before experimenting or not. So this is a huge debate in the philosophy of science between a posteriori and a priori knowledge. A priori means you can know it without actually going and checking. For example, the classic example is all bachelors are unmarried. You don't have to go look for the bachelors and ask each and every one of them, are you unmarried, are you unmarried? You can just know it before checking. Whereas a posteriori claims, necessitate that I go check. For example, all ravens are black. I don't know that. I got to go and then bring all the ravens here and then see whether they are all black really, or there's some genetic mutation in some one of them that causes them to be white or any other color. Okay, so there's if you just do it as an exercise, you will find lots and lots of hidden assumptions in every simple conversation we have. Dominic brought out the meaning of the words. We all assume that the word feather means feather. It's just the thing that's on the bird, but it could mean something else in this context. We just assumed, right? We assumed that the word cannot is standard negation. Well, as we will discover again in later episodes, negation has many ways of being achieved: weak negation, strong negation, etc. So I can count warrants forever. This is not the actual point for today. if you're hungry for it, we will do a lot more of this. I just want to ground the meaning of the word. That's my objective of this slide.
I think you've done that. And I know what I would say is that from a practical point of view, having a few categories of warrants to be on the lookout for is incredibly useful. And I've now got 2 or 3 that you've mentioned, which is a useful thinking heuristic. This can help you think more clearly because you can run through those and look for those category errors. So that, I mean, that's what I've got. I'm keen for you to carry on.
Well, I was wondering if thinking, the process of thinking in these preliminary introductory examples, is implicit. And I was thinking of the experiment of the caveman experimenting with fire, in which a warrant is established somehow between the caveman who has no language, um, and utilizes the same system in order to find truth between himself and his relationship with fire. Is it, could is the process without language the same of establishing a
Well,
warrant, a basis for the warrant, and a prediction, a probability of something being true?
you're asking a very difficult question for me to answer, and for anybody, for the matter of fact, because it has many layers. So layer number 1 I can identify is, do we think with nature, with language and without language alike? And this will be a topic that we will cover. You're asking about cavemen in particular. The truth is, I don't know. Whether they can achieve the same action, yes, of course. Whether their inner process, so lighting a fire or collecting fruits or whatever, whether their inner process is the same with or without language, I cannot really tell for sure. But when you say without language, I think what language adds is, for some people, keep that in mind, is that inner monologue that keeps tracks and records the events and then tells the memory later. Some other people still alive with us today, we discovered very recently, don't have that inner monologue. So they don't, they are very operational, they can speak, but they don't have the inner monologue. And so without the inner monologue, do they think like us? My personal answer, we can never know unless we scan their brains and then they discover more things about it. Okay, so this has to do with how our brains process language much more than it has to do with what is it that our experience with the universe is, uh, or the meaning we can get out of it. And I'm not discussing this. I'm kind of discussing a much more basic thing, which is, you cannot start talking without having certain assumptions, and those assumptions can be discovered and can be discussed, and we have to discuss them, and this is what we call philosophy. Am I making sense, Dominic?
Yes, you are. Yes. But
Perfect.
I
So
thought, I was thinking to myself that the formula that you're presenting, uh, in its earliest possible rendition, would still be true, with or without language. That in order to know truth of fire, uh, a, 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 a warrant would have to be established, based on some prior knowledge, that, hey, it burns my fingers, and a probability that I will be burnt again if I do something uh, close to the fire. It's a discovery of sorts of truth, which I think philosophy is, I think, what we're in search of.
we are, and
Right.
what you're discussing is within the definition of knowledge. How can we access knowledge? Can we do it tacitly, so without actually speaking it, or without actually writing it down, and without actually being aware of it? We all have this tacit knowledge in us. When I throw a pen to you, you can catch the pen or the object or the ball. You're not thinking about it. So this is something that happens because you have some knowledge, but you cannot explain how you did it. You just tell me, oh, I just placed my hand where I expected the thing to be. So this is part of a deeper conversation about what is knowledge and what is not knowledge, which we will have at some point, not today. Okay, so let's save those ideas for next time or the time after that. And I will announce the topics beforehand so you can know exactly what to expect. Okay. Very quickly, academically speaking, if you move with me to the next slide. Academically speaking, the branches of philosophy are many. So you can imagine philosophy of anything. Philosophy of psychology, philosophy of language, philosophy of whatever. Why? Again, because for every domain, there are those initial assumptions that are often not discussed by the people in the domain themselves. And discovering them is rich and is meaningful. The main five I would like to discuss, and I hope I will have time to discuss all of them today. If not, we're just going to leave it until next time. So the first one is logic. So logic was a big part of philosophy and still is. Mathematics has started taking over, but logic, as Stefan Toulmin and others explain, it doesn't have to be the formal logic. So there's this informal logic that we use in everyday life to make sense with each other. And it just focuses on reasoning and argumentation and what structures do we allow that we can generate sound conclusions out of. This is what logic is, in short. The other branch is epistemology. So what Dominic was asking and what I was asking a little bit earlier, how do we know what is knowledge? What does it mean to know? And do we have access to that knowledge in the beginning? So that investigation, how is it that we know what we know, is part of epistemology. And this is essentially very, at the heart of every discussion we have on Clubhouse in the scientific discourse room, when people are questioning the validity of scientific conclusions, this is an exercise in epistemology. Number three is ethics. Ethics defines morality and values. So it addresses what is it that the right thing to do in some situation, sometimes in every situation. And of course, we have many answers for many things, I'm sure you know. The number four is aesthetics, essentially the study of beauty. And I'm going to talk more about that later. And you have number five, metaphysics, which scientists hate. It's just that the definition of it, or the word, has gained some popular meaning that is not actually its meaning. Metaphysics is actually the examination of existence. So what is it that exists? What is it that doesn't exist? What is the nature of reality, mainly, is the question. And I'm going to talk about each one of those separately in detail. Okay? Again, these are not the only ways you can hear the word philosophy. You can imagine philosophy of anything. Again, why? Because what I'm defining philosophy to be, and what people in the academic world, most of them, that's how they do it anyway, even if they're not aware. You're looking for those assumptions that kickstart the work. This is what this is. Yes, John.
So I was looking at that list. It's a very satisfying list. They're all words that I am familiar with. They delineate very clearly different things. And it's tempting. It was tempting for me at first to think that this was in some ways a really nice summary. Then you can talk about the philosophy of this or that. But that's a very, very different thing than delineating between aesthetics and metaphysics and epistemology and logic and all that. So I just wonder, if you were to add one more thing to this list, what would that thing be?
Ooh, I would say, that's one thing you want me to add. I'll say philosophy.
Comprehensive.
Yeah,
Sure,
I'll
go
say
ahead.
no. You can add. I think I can safely add philosophy of language here. So the study of meaning. What does it mean to mean? How do you establish meaning? It's not encompassed in any of the five, and I'm very interested in this, and I studied this.
So I think that's a good thing. Does that thing have, because these five names are just such classic names for things. Does the study of language have, I mean, would that have a name that would be right up there with ethics and epistemology and all that?
It's difficult to answer your question because whoever depends on the person listening to me, but all of you will think I'm an idiot if I do. The classic name is philology. And philology is,
Okay.
yeah, it's the love of the letter, okay? But then the name got taken over by essentially classics and Bible scholars. So now there's a split between the people who study the Bible and the people who study classic manuscripts. And some of those became, the philologists of today. But Friedrich Nietzsche identified himself as a philologist. So there is a word if you're asking for that, but it doesn't mean what I'm meaning today. By asking about meaning, the theory of meaning itself doesn't have the word it used to have in the past. Another one could be philosophy of mind. So that's another big one. And then it merges at some point today with, I should not say it merges, it is on the edge of what we know about the brain and about neurology, with of course all the psychology that we have. So this theory of how the mind affects the body and the body affects the mind, it started as a philosophy, but now it's kind of moving together. You can include totally religion here. So you can say philosophy of religion. Yeah, that's another big branch. Another big one is political philosophy, also not encompassed in any of those. Those ones are particular to the domain, though. Some people put politics altogether under ethics, because politics is about action in the world, and ethics organize the actions between people and about the laws, etc. And some people say, oh no, this is about planning for the future. So the values that we highly regard today, liberty, equality, sovereignty, etc. These are predefinitions to what actions we will take. So in that sense, they fit under the banner of philosophy. So there's plenty, actually, John. If you just take a look at those, just if you want to know more, just the Wikipedia page or the encyclopedia entry will have way more titles than the ones I've put.
Yeah, I was just kind of motivated by the fact that I was trying to think of other, names like that don't include the philosophy of blah blah blah. Got there can feel kind of exhaustive just because there's such um, everybody is aware. I shouldn't say. I mean, I think a lot of people don't know what epistemology means, but once you do, you kind of realize, okay, that's a big thing, such a big thing that it has its own name. Philology, I think, doesn't really do it for me the way epistemology does, but I guess it's kind of the same way.
That's just you and me. That's our bias. All right. So it is already 7:30, so we have been live for an hour. I will do this first slide. So if you remember on the slides, we have number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. I will do the first one, logic, and then if you feel like continuing, I'm by all means I'm here. And if you're tired, we can stop here and open the floor for discussion and continue later. So you guys tell me, but just to give you a taste of what's coming, okay? So to explain what logic is, so this is the first branch that was classically under philosophy. Logic is divided between formal and informal, as we explained. Informal just means the way that we use to discuss, oh, because of this, then that, what we were doing before, with the warrant, with the claims, with the grounds, etc. That was informal logic, the logic that people use in everyday life to access conclusions, to access truths that they don't have before the start of the argument or before the start of the discussion. Interesting fact is that this form of logic, the informal one, it has started very, very late. It has started in the 20th century, in the last half of the 20th century, by people like Howard Kahan or Stephen Toulmin, which I've mentioned before. So this is very new to understand logic in this informal way. For most of history, from the Greeks until now, the study of logic was reserved to the very, intelligent or the very professionals. And let's face it, in history, for men, women couldn't do that. It was kind of this in that space. You have to be a philosopher to do logic, right? but now it has moved to become something very easy, and then you can hear people yelling logical fallacies at each other on every room in Clubhouse. Oh, you made this logical fallacy, that logical fallacy. And this is what I'm hoping our topic for next time would be. Our topic for next time would be delving into the different logical fallacies that people make. All of this is informal logic, okay? So logical fallacies is the mistake that you can do while making reasoning. So it becomes an incorrect reasoning. You're making a mistake in your logic. You're making a mistake in the mechanism that allows you to participate in the discussion. And when you call each other on a mistake, you're relying on the fact that you have a common logic. You have a common way of establishing meaning and truth. That would be the warrant. If no assumptions are shared, and John, we've had that conversation, you and I, before, I believe that you cannot move forward. And this is a big discussion that I'm not going to delve into now. To give you a taste of what formal logic is, it looks like the one you're seeing here. It's a very dry language, and it's full of symbols. I wish Benjamin was here, because Benjamin keeps coming back to this example of Boolean logic. Can we use Boolean logic? Whatever. What you see here, if you're interested, very quickly, is two different axiomatization of some logic. So formal logicians or mathematicians, they don't understand logic as informal people understand it, which is like one logic common for everybody. They know that every theory has its own language. And this particular example I brought, it's two different axiomatizations that give exactly the same logic at the end. So you get the same conclusions from both. If you don't understand what the symbols are, it's totally not necessary at this point. All you're invited to do is watch that some V's are up in the column on the left, and then on the column on the right, they are turned down, and they have different meanings, but they give the same result at the end. Okay? And this is not Boolean logic. This is some subset of it, or I should say, a bigger category that encompasses it. Because you cannot prove in this logic, for example, the rule of the excluded middle. Some other logics you can. Informally, we take this for granted. Oh, it has to be either on or off. You either won or lost. You either achieved what you want or you didn't. You are either good or bad in some discussions, right? You are either evil or an angel. People kind of accept those dichotomies in real life informally, very easily. Whereas formal logicians who do their job very carefully, they know that not every time you can prove such a claim, like the example I just gave. All you have to read here, if you're not familiar with the language, and you will be, we did a room in the past, we're going to do another one here. You cannot deduce, the line at the bottom says you cannot deduce whether, so if you pick any random x, you cannot deduce whether it's true or false. And we are married to this in colloquial conversations and in informal life. You cannot just give me a sentence which we don't know the meaning of. It has to have a truth value. Either we know, which is true or false, or we don't know, so we do some experiment to find out. Are you telling me that there's some things that we can't know? Well, in this logic there is. So this is the difference between the formal and the informal. This is one of the major differences. Okay, that's all I have to say about logic. Shall we continue, or are you guys tired?
I would like to continue. But I mean, if the other option is going to discussion, I really do enjoy the discussion as well. But even a hybrid model, or honestly anything, is fine. I'm not even sure why.
So you're having fun, essentially. Is Ben Tristram
I'm
having
having
fun?
fun.
That's what I want to know.
Fun is existing. Yeah.
Did we trigger your buzzer yet?
No buzzer. Boredom, not buzzer. I was having fun when you were talking about warrants, when you were talking about different categories of warrants. I thought that was cool. Getting into defining different types of logic. Again, my utility buzzer has gone off. I'm not seeing any utility. So the utility I've taken so far is that there are implicit and explicit assumptions, which I guess I already knew, but that there are classes of implicit assumptions you can be on the lookout for. And I've heard a couple, such as stability of rules over time and not enough details. That's what I've got from so far.
All right, cool. You'll get your plenty. And when we discuss this in detail, the warrants of science. When I discuss the scientific method, I think you'll get your plenty. I want to say hi to Jonathan. Jonathan, you had something to say? Go ahead.
Yes, first of all, thank you very much. I'm thoroughly enjoying this. On a personal note, I'm thrilled that Stephen Toulmin is a a, a cornerstone in your framing of all this. I'll not bore you all with my backstory about why, but I think Toulmin is really important. One question is, I'm only familiar with Toulmin really from his book Human Understanding, and I just looked in the index, and he doesn't include warrant or ground at all in that entire book. And second, his Wittgenstein in Vienna. But can you explain the derivation of why he chose the word warrant? Is that from the legal context?
I don't know why he chose the word. First of all, let me get you the name of the book where he lays it down. Let me Google it for a second so that you know, because the guy is a philosopher. He wrote about a lot of things,
Yeah.
but mainly his work was in this book that I should have attached to the slide, by the way, but I was lazy to copy the name, and now the name escapes my memory.
Okay.
One
So
second.
I'm hovering over this word warrant because it clearly caused some perplexity. It caused people to emit perplexons, which are the fundamental particle of confusion in human thinking. So I think understanding the etymology of the word or the source of the word may help ground it. In no pun intended. Why the word warrant? Because that's not a word that is commonly used.
So the name of the book is The Uses of Argument in 1958. The Uses of Argument. So this is where you can find Stephen Toulmin's work. If you're looking for Howard Skahan work, you will find it in the book Proceedings and Addresses of the American Psychological Associations, 2002, and it's a text in that journal. To answer your warrant question, again, I cannot know exactly why he thought of it, but the way I understand it is, it's something that guarantees. It's a guarantee. That's how I hear the word. So
like
if you it's a word. Something like that. So if you want to continue the conversation, if you want to even start the conversation, you got to agree to those fundamental assumptions or fundamental givens. He calls them warrants. You can call them anything else. That's not the real point. The point here is to highlight the importance of agreeing on certain things before we start. And those can be chosen.
Warrants can be disagreed upon very fundamentally. So, for example, in the Clubhouse context, people may say in their profiles, "I do not consent to my voice being recorded," and then they merrily walk into rooms that are clearly written replay on. So there's the person who wrote that comment in their profile has issued their warrant. I do not consent to being recorded, but the owner of the room has issued a different warranty, and they're in conflict.
Oh, that's just a contradiction, and so that's lack of consistency. Okay, and if they're operating under the logic that we've just seen, this is not a problem, because this logic admits that you cannot tell for some claims whether they are true or false. The warrant in what you're saying is you're assuming that people make sense all the time, and they don't. But to develop on your point, people when they put these things, or let's say let's not talk about their profiles. When they go in a clubhouse room, most often what you will hear is, and we should mention this at some point, this logic that we're talking about, it was discovered later on that it comes secondary. So they're making emotional arguments first, and then they're just getting the logic to back it up. And this is very firmly, established after we started studying the human mind and psychology. But this is most of what we're hearing.
Okay, great. So the whole warrant thing, I'll look into that myself separately. Thanks for the
please, if you found if you found a real, I haven't found a real explanation by Toulmin himself why he picked the word. If you find something, please let me know via the private message, or next time when we do it on next Wednesday, just jump in and say, oh, I discovered what Stephen Toulmin. I'd really appreciate that.
Oh, and a follow-up question that you actually elicited. I wrote in the text as well. So you talked about it being an irrational argument or irrational position statement, being the conflict. So that leads into my question about whether informal logics could actually be subsumed in or taxonomized into a formal logic in using the language of formal logic. Famously, Bertrand Russell and Whitehead took, what was it, 56 pages in formal logic to prove that 1 + 1 = 2.
Oh, more, 200 something pages,
Yeah, whatever it
250
was.
something.
Yeah. But my question is, cannot informal logics be analyzed and axiomatized using formal logic, or if not, then does that mean that informal logic is really a branch of philosophy of mind, or philosophy of human mind, or philosophy of language?
To start with the end there, of course, whenever we're talking about what people do, these domains merge at some level. So I cannot talk about psychology without talking about neurology, and I cannot talk about that without the philosophical
Yeah.
background and under what discussion. And then you enter philosophy of mind. Oh, of course, there's language. So these minds, they're operating with a certain language. So especially for people, I go back to the point I should have attached the study where some people we discovered that they don't have that internal monologue. So
Yeah.
all of it merges at some point. What your question was is that whether can informal logics be studied as formal logics and axiomatized, and absolutely they can, 100%. That's why we have formal logic, so that anything informal and common between people, we can put it in very accurate terms and study it very accurately, rather than just start waving hands and talking about it. So that's a very important point that I cannot emphasize more, that the tools that we've discovered, the tools that we have, those same tools, they are useful. It's not that we're doing this for fun, right?
Okay, so it's not that informal logic and formal logic um, are are not reducible to the same terms. It's that formerly, formal logic was dealt with in terms of logical axioms, and informal logic was processed and described in other terms besides pure logical propositions.
Yes, and it doesn't have the same structure. So
Okay,
as you're doing informal logic, you will not find someone saying, oh, the axioms of my theory are this and that, and this is theorem one, and this is theorem two, and etc. You won't have derivation rules in formal logic. You will just hear someone say, oh, you made a mistake. Oh, this is a hasty generalization. Oh, this is not, you know what I mean? You will find bits and pieces of information. But, if we wanted to, and we have, you can axiomatize whatever piece of logic you want, of course.
okay. Excellent answer. Thank you so much, Shamash.
Welcome, sir, and I hope everybody is enjoying it. Any other thing about logic, ladies and gentlemen? We will have specific rooms for every topic. I just want to see if there's any curiosity that you have.
Well, yeah, no, I'm happy. I'm locked in the car here listening to you, so I'm good. But I did have one thing I wondered. Maybe you'll go on more later on. Uh, as you know, I've become really enamored of the word entailment, which is a word I think I was hearing people bandy around on Clubhouse long before I appreciated kind of what a useful, specific word it is. And I'm now kind of in that same state with the word sound, because I hear people being, referring to sound arguments, which don't necessarily mean, I think, true arguments or correct or something that makes something true. But can you say a few words about, what it means to make an argument, sound?
Okay, I will say only a few words because I can talk about this for hours. But you're absolutely right. Sound and the truth, or let's say demonstrable, are two different things. Let's call them truth one and the truth two for simplicity, because I don't want to keep using those difficult words. Ben made a very important point that we should not be using academic terms. It drives people, they're confused. So truth one is a truth that is about the system itself. So you can go and then say, I'm going to make my mathematics. And then you can make the mathematics in a certain way where 1 + 1 is equal to 2, right? That is a truth about the math. It's a truth about what you've just created. Okay, and if you're hearing me and you're saying, oh, this is something in the universe, we can discuss this later. These are two different philosophies of math. Some people believe it is discovered. Some people believe that it is in the system. But whether it is translatable to the real world or not is a question. And I can leave you with a small, a question or a small example for you to keep thinking about this. When I say what's 10 to the 100 plus 10 to the 100, mathematically speaking, that's just 2 times 10 to the 100, right? What is it? 10 to the 100 is a gogol, right? One gogol plus one gogol makes 2 gogols. Where? Can you find this in real life anywhere? Not really, because the maximum number of atoms is already, way less than that number. And so can you really say that this is true in the real world, right? If you go out in the world and you check, can you check that truth? So that we will call truth too. Okay, so an argument that is valid or an argument that is sound has to do with whether you're applying it to a model or not. And in our case, if the model is the physical universe we live in, sometimes you can write things on a piece of paper and they work, so they will be true on the paper and true in the real world. And sometimes you can write things that are true on the paper but have nothing to do with the real world.
Well, it
So this is
sounds
the difference between sound and demonstrable.
right. And one example that I often give when I'm talking about, think people, I use the example, is space-time really curved? And the answer is yes, it absolutely is really curved in the model we call general relativity.
Exactly. And then when you say in the model we call general relativity, do you know what you're doing here? You are identifying one of the warrants. You are saying, oh, hold up. You're assuming that too much here. I'm going to fix one of those. I'm going to say, in this model, this is exactly what my meaning now refers to. The words I'm saying mean something in that frame of reference. Don't go to any other frame of reference in your head with a hidden warrant in your head and then come back with some wrong understanding. No. This is exactly, ground yourself in that frame of reference. That's a philosophical choice. You could have made any other choice to make sense, right? So this is exactly what we're trying to study here. Andre Hominid is asking, internal consistency equals valid? Not necessarily. Consistency is something else. Consistency is whether you can have the thing and its negation both true in a system. And again, I cannot really expand on this now, but some logics, and again, there are many of them, not only one, the one we use informally, allow for those contradictions. One of the examples is, for example, the fuzzy logic. Another one will be quantum logic. So those logics allow for things to be true and false at the same time. That is consistency. This is what consistency means. So the thing and its negation both being having some truth. Being valid has to do with whether you can find a proof of something or not. So those are two different things. Again, more on this later. I'm going to have a big room on logic, a big room on metaphysics, a big room on whatever. We can talk about these for hours, and I'm really happy that you guys have questions. I just want to make sure that we get the idea of what this is doing here, and why is it essential to be aware of these rules. Because if we're not aware of them, then we can make mistakes, and then if you make mistakes, you can create disagreements, and you can go to war over this. And this is what happens actually. Okay. Are we in the mood for one more? Let's do one more. So the next one is epistemology. Epistemology is the theory of knowledge. Anything that has this root of epistemic, has to do with knowledge. It is the study of knowledge. Basically, it asks these questions. When you say, I know this, I know that, what does it mean? That's question number one. What is knowledge? And if you're thinking, well, knowledge is just when I know things, I will invite you to think about the difference between when you know something and it turns out that you really know it, and when you think you know something, but then you discover later on that you had a misunderstanding or a mistake. So before you discovered that you had a mistake in your reasoning, you believed that you knew it, but then you don't anymore. And this is one of the questions. Is knowledge something we can eternally have? Is 1 + 1 = 2 eternally true for everybody? Or is this depending on my checking of that fact? So this is question number one. Question number two is, what is it exactly that we do know? So there's the big box called knowledge, and we're putting things into it. What are these things? Can we really make sure that whatever we're putting in this box fits in that box? After we've defined it, of course. And question number three is, what mechanism are we using? How is it that we know what we know? What mechanism, what rules are we using to classify things between things that we know and things that we don't really know and things we know are false? So this distinction, on what grounds are you making it? And again, if you're thinking, oh, this is obvious, again, look around you in the world. Very big disagreements are erupting all over the place, simply because, essentially, if you want to boil it down, people don't agree on these mechanisms. What is it that you consider to be true? Do X, Y, and Z have the right to do Z or not? How do you know? What is the mechanism that you're using to prove that this is the case or it's not the case? For example, I have an example here on the slide. I know that it is good to drink water. Okay, someone would say, I know that. That's knowledge. That's piece of knowledge. Well, how did we know? That's not evident. You just know it. Is it because other people have tried it? So because other people drank water and now they're better and it was better for them, that automatically means it's good for you? What's the hidden assumption here? What's the warrant? The warrant is what applies to other humans will most likely apply to me. Well, that's not always the case, is it? So how did you know that? And what guarantees that whatever experiments we did with other people are repeatable to begin with? So Ben, if you want more warrants, this is examples of questions you can ask. Is it good in absolute? So drinking water, is it absolutely good, like with anything, any quantity, any time, anywhere? Or do we have restrictions on the circumstances? Oh, you have to drink this amount of water. Beyond that, it hurts you. You can get problems from drinking too much. Can you drink too fast, too quickly, too slowly? If the water is dirty, should you always drink it if you're thirsty or not? So there's all these questions happening. Is there a limit to what we can know about water? That's another discussion. So if maybe water has this quality about it that we cannot really access. I know some groups on Clubhouse here keep referring to the sun having qualities we cannot really access because we cannot go there because there's something preventing us from doing so. The dome that they imagine. And so they have that belief. And it is a very common belief amongst people if you go ask them. We are married to certain truths without any indication that they could be. Brushing your teeth is another famous example. I doubted that any one of us has gone over the research that has to do with it. But, we all do it, I hope. So, yeah, that's another question. How is it that we know and what does it mean? That is epistemology. Yes, John.
Well, I was going to say, I think that, so epistemology probably doesn't reach any conclusions about when you can say that you do know. For instance, one of the things that I like to say is that for 60 years, it has been a quote directly observed fact that the Earth is a globe. We have pictures of it. We have people that have seen it with their own two eyes, and that's how I quote know that the Earth is a globe. But it's not completely unreasonable for people to take issue with even seeing something or taking a picture of it as being something that can let one know something about it. I, I think, I don't know. I
Yeah.
consider at some point in physics, we have to say, no, seeing something with your own eyes, there are, of course, optical illusions and things, but there are things that we take as kind of base. Yeah, this is just a fact, a directly observed fact. That doesn't rule out somebody taking issue with our epistem homology and saying, no, that's not a fact for this reason or that.
All right. So I can play devil's advocate here, and I can tell you, well, you're just admitting yourself that our senses go rogue in some circumstances. And so how can you rely on that mechanism? How can you rely on that directly observable fact? You're seeing the sun, but it's not actually there. It's in another location. And you're imagining it there because of your brain and how it is. How would you know what I mean? And so you better have a good detailed explanation here of how the system has been constructed. And I do know for a fact that the person asking that question is not necessarily looking for that explanation, but in the scientific community internally, we should have an answer for the people looking for it. And you would be surprised if you look for those answers. You would be surprised how much of the basic definitions are neglected. The famous example I really know about is the definition of a straight line. Euclid doesn't give it, and it's nowhere. The definition of the basic units we use weren't even set before now, like very lately. The definition of the kilogram has been fixed, what is it, 10 years ago? And the definition of time as a second, right, it has been fixed using the cesium atom, so it's very lately also. We have been neglecting these things for so long, and they matter in these heated discussions with someone from another camp. You need to be able to tell them, well, how is it exactly that the system is operating? It's a very valid question that people are asking. So this is number two. This is epistemology. So I'm gonna run quickly through ethics. So you guys know what it is. This is the organization of what we must do, what we should avoid doing, what are we encouraged to do, and what we must do. And I'm going to leave the discussion on the slide for later. What's the difference between normative and applied ethics and meta-ethics? That's for later. Okay, and so ethics essentially is the study of these four questions. And then every society, every group of people, every person has the choice to put whatever they feel like it. And essentially, feel here is not a bad word, because you cannot intuit and you cannot think. That's what I mean to say. So you cannot really analyze this without a theory. A theory of ethics will come in and help you quantify and class these actions that you are possible to do in the world into these four categories: what you must do, what you mustn't do, and everything in between. What is the theory you're using? And again, many of us just have a bunch of informal ethics that we use. Oh, we shouldn't hurt each other, we shouldn't kill, we shouldn't do whatever. But then if you go down the details, these rules are very flexible. And if you want to sacrifice consistency, be my guest. But if you want to be consistent, then you better have a good, consistent, coherent theory that explains why is it that the things you say are not allowed or are allowed are in fact allowed. Many people, for example, today, to give you one ethical problem, many people object to cloning. And I read a piece of news a couple of days ago that there was a farmer in the US, and if you know where, I forgot, but it's in some state where he cloned a sheep or a goat, I think, and then he kept cloning it for a prolonged time, and then he reproduced those clones together, which was completely against the US law. And then they don't know what to do with this guy because he was breeding goats. It's not a huge crime that he has committed, but at the same time, under the law of his state, it's illegal, it's unethical. And then you can start asking, well, why is it? And in the past, gay marriage was unethical. Today, in some countries, it is. In some countries, it isn't. Again, etc. So these things have to do with the coherent body of what we believe society should be like. And this is a matter of choice. It's a matter of philosophy. It's not something that you can access by doing, although you can do experiments, but it's not something that you can start by doing experiments. You need to fix your assumptions first, beforehand. The sheep cloning was in Montana, yes. Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, so I just looked up a Montana guy apparently cloning, trying to create a giant sheep or something. Of course, I mean, the only reason we really know about it is what he did was illegal. All right. It's not about whether it's unethical or not. The only reason we really know about it is because he broke the law.
And that law was put there either randomly. So if we are fine with our laws being assigned randomly, then you should ask, well, it could have been that he didn't do anything wrong, and then the law can be changed immediately. Or you can say, oh,
Yeah.
there's a very fundamental reason for that law, and that's an ethical law which has to do with animal rights. And if that is the
Right.
case, then you can ask all sorts of questions. Did that man agree on those ethics? Is it moral to force people to agree on your ethics if this is the state doing it? You can open all sorts of doors to hell in this particular case and in other more complicated cases.
Right. I think that's exactly right. But I think I've found it very useful to kind of ground my whatever remnant of my idea about objective morality in the idea that as a society, we come to compromises, we come to kind of via democratic, we come to laws, and those laws express kind of the things that I think moral people all ultimately agree on for some reason, whether it's objective or subjective, doesn't matter. Ultimately, it finds its place in laws. Um, and there's really I think it's hard to go much further than that in talking about. I think there are laws. I think we all think there are laws that shouldn't be laws. That's because we think they are unethical in some ways, right? They're doing something that's wrong. And when that's really the case, when most people agree, then presumably the law, if the society is functioning the way it ought to, then those laws get changed. I mean, that's a hopelessly ideal view of things, but I think there's almost no way ultimately to make any further progress.
This is what most people do when they haven't philosophized about ethics. They treat the law and ethics as the same set of rules, but they are different forms of rules by which humans are expected to behave. And they're not the same. And a lot of people who haven't done the philosophy about ethics haven't thought about this, right? There's a famous, question: would it be okay for a poor, starving person to steal a loaf of bread to feed their family? What's the
Exactly,
ethics?
dude.
Because the law is not, it's not lawful, but what is the ethics there?
And I can give you an opposite kind of example. So some things aren't allowed and they could be moral, and some things are allowed and they are immoral, right? Evading taxes, for example, using some charity work or whatever. People do it, or donating this money to I don't know, a certain political party or whatever. So this is completely legal. Nobody can prevent you from doing it. But is it moral? Is it good to do so? And then you can ask what good is. This is exactly the discussions that we are invited to have. And again, you guys have it all the time. With your friends, with your kids, with your spouses, with your colleagues at work. These discussions are always there. We just that people don't know that this is really philosophy. They think philosophy is reserved for some group of people who have big beards. We are all philosophers in a sense. Some of us are just a little bit better than others are doing it. All right. Number 4, aesthetics. Again, very quickly, it used to be about the study of beauty and what looks nice. The ancient Greeks and other people believed that beauty is universal. Today, we don't have that belief anymore. So the study of beauty has been transformed into the study of art, which got integrated into the theory of art itself, or let's call it philosophy of art. Okay, so artists worry about what match together, etc. Most of us don't. What it is about today, staying under the title "What looks nice," is, for example, is beauty objective? Do we all see beauty the same way? And you'd be surprised here. Turns out that many kinds of beauty are objective. People all around the world, after we studied it, turned out that we see nice things similarly. So what you call nice is most likely other people calling it nice as well. But that doesn't prove the point. Some things aren't. So there's a discussion there. Is it grounded in instinct or culture? Is it just that your opinion, looking at it, and then, or is it something that you inherit from your culture? Again, here, the two things can be true at the same time in various contexts. I can tell you musical beauty is very contextualized, and it's very cultural. What I hear as good music depends not only on the culture I live in, but, for example, on the household I grew up in, and so on. Is the search for beauty a must? Is it something necessary? Should we always look for it or not? And to help the more scientific people amongst us, this discussion is not completely for non-scientific, because there is at least one example I can think of where aesthetics comes in essentially in logic and in epistemology, in things that we do in the lab every day. And this is about Occam's razor. And I'm sure most of you know, Occam's razor is this belief, or this sort of desire that every theory has, which is to remove all the unneeded assumptions from it. So if you have a theory that has 15 assumptions, 15 axioms, right? 15 initial warrants, if you want to call them that, they aren't the same thing, but humor me to avoid the use of new words. So these initial premises, and another theory has only 5 instead of 15. Oh, that theory is much more desirable now. And if you think about it, this is not something that has to do with physics. This is not something that has to do with the mathematics. The logic, I just showed you an example of two different logics that give exactly equivalent conclusions, equivalent theorems, but they start from two different places. And so it doesn't have to do anything with the working of the theory itself. It can work with, in fact, if you want to ask about the working of the theory, having more assumptions makes my life easier. Because now, if proving everything in the theory can use more tools, I have 15, 20, 25 different tools to take as granted. Whereas in another theory, you have only 3 initial assumptions. Famously, for example, the special relativity can be axiomatized in this way. So you only need 3 assumptions to do special relativity. And so if you have more, it makes working with the theory easier. But no, we prefer the one that has less assumptions. And that, I claim, is only an aesthetic preference. Okay? So this is a search of our satisfaction with the theory that says, my theory works, but my theory has less ungranted assumption than yours. It's kind of saying, oh, this is more clever, this is more elegant. It doesn't fit under any other title for me. So this is what aesthetics is about. All right, if no comments or questions, I'm going to move to 5th one. Oh, yes, sorry.
Yeah. So with respect to aesthetics, and one thing that I hold as a grounding is that whenever we're talking about humans and human systems, as an evolutionary biologist, I always think of it in terms of how would other species approach these kinds of questions? And it turns out that many of our aesthetic preferences about beauty are actually found in the expressions of other species' semiotic communications with other species. So, for example, we as humans find flowers beautiful, but the design of a flower that has been arrived at through its evolutionary relationship with its pollinator is that the flower's design has been optimized to fit the aesthetic preference of that pollinator with respect to the color or the odor or the pollen or nectar rewards. So I think aesthetics is one of those places where thinking pan-specifically about its philosophical grounding is uniquely valuable as compared to some other branches of philosophy, perhaps. I don't know that I believe what I just said, but I'm just throwing that out there.
I don't know either. I know very little about aesthetics. I'm more of a scientific guy. I'm just trying to introduce the discussion here. And yes, maybe you're absolutely right. I really don't know here. I got to do more reading. I'm pretty sure that this discussion is wide open over there. I'm not familiar with this literature in particular.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, then we move very quickly to the very last one, which is metaphysics. Again, a very bad word for people who come from a scientific background. I used to use it as a slur until I discovered what it was really about. Metaphysics, when you see this word meta, you will hear it a lot if you're in the business of doing logic and philosophy. There's ethics and meta ethics, and physics and metaphysics, and science and meta science. Like you can put this prefix everywhere. And what it means is on the periphery, on the outside, beyond. That's what it really indicates. Mark Zuckerberg liked that, and he called his company with the word. If you hear meta. Metaphysics, so is the study of whatever is outside of physics. And you can think of it as, okay, this is hocus pocus. If you are a physicalist, if you're a hard materialist, you can think of this as hocus pocus. But if you know exactly everything that is outside of the physics, then by extension, you've known everything that is inside of the physics. So studying what is the physics and what is not the physics are kind of the same thing. If you can win on one side, you can get the other one guaranteed for free, as long as you do it properly so that things don't end up in and out at the same time. Okay, so if you have an excluded middle here, you're still undecided, right? If you don't have excluded middle, I mean, you're still undecided. Oh, does moral ethics? So John made the claim earlier that you can have something objective and material ethics. Well, that's a big discussion. Essentially, do these ethics exist in the world, and do the laws of physics exist in the world? And this is what metaphysics asks. It asks, what is it the nature of existence? Essentially, the box that we will call existence. What is it that we bring into it, and what is it that we don't allow into it? And you can expand this discussion in any topic you want. So some of the examples I put here on the slide. Is redness a property innate to the object? So when you say an apple is red, is this property somewhere in the universe? And there's a big discussion here whether it is or it isn't, because you can say, oh, this is something that our brain sees as human beings and other animals see something different. But then you can ask, what is it that our brain sees? It's something that has to do with the object. Some objects reflect colors differently, and so on and so forth. You can keep going on in this. And then, of course, there's other problems with looking at colors as properties in the universe, because where are they? Can you think of a new color? Can you imagine it? There's all sorts of problems. I don't want to go there. I'm just asking the questions today. Another question is, what makes an apple, for example, an apple? That's the problem of identity, right? Is there a model of the apple? The debate between Plato and Aristotle. Is there a model out there of an apple? And then this apple, the one I have in my hand, is an instantiation of it. You can ask, does a lion exist? This line right out of the mouth of Jordan Peterson in his latest interview with, if you've seen it, with Dawkins. So Dawkins asked him, do you believe that dragons exist? And Jordan Peterson, because he has a different metaphysics than the hard scientist Dawkins, he said, do you believe that a lion exists? And from a certain point of view, I'm not here defending Jordan Peterson, I'm just trying to say what the different philosophies entail. And so when he asked the question, he's asking, this lion that you have in mind, what are the characteristics that set it apart from any other beast? And then you can ask the same question if you're not a fan of the animal kingdom. Does an electron exist? What does it define? Does a photon exist? Right? Like, these are tools we use in the theory, as Professor John said a minute ago. Like in the realm of special relativity, some things exist. In the realm of general relativity, space-time is curved. But then, are we? What kind of truth is this? Is this the kind of truth where it's on the paper, or is it the kind of truth that translates into whatever it is that we call the real world? Because after point 5 here, we should ask, this is the question: what are the elements of the real world? What does this real world contain? What are the elements that we are perfectly happy of allowing to exist? Does Harry Potter exist? Well, in some sense, he's a character in a book, and that's a real book, and he exists in that book. But then, he's not a citizen of any country. There's no papers for him, so on and so forth. So he's an imaginary character. And so what level of existence is that exactly? You can ask these questions about values, about rights, about whatever, love, right? And then, of course, you can ask them about the laws of physics. Do they exist out there in the real world? Are we discovering them? Are we going out there in the world and asking, hey, universe, can you tell us one of your laws, please? Because we're trying to figure out this rocket over here. Or is it our discovery of how things work that has been shaped over millennia by small contributions of each and every one of us that has led to us looking at the universe in that way? Maybe another civilization out there in the very vast big universe have a totally different understanding about the world in which laws don't exist. Laws of physics is not a thing over there. So it's our projection onto the universe that there's something something true in it that is revealing itself to us. So is there? Is another question. And another question is the one we asked about mathematics like 10 minutes ago. Is it discovered or invented? Is a different question as well. So because most people, if again, I'm hearing discussions on Clubhouse and I'm using that as my reference here for most people, or for colloquial discussions. So most people is like, yeah, like we know for sure that 1 + 1 is equal to, right? Like that's a fact. That's just, everybody agrees on that. Well, the thing that everybody agrees on is just taken here as 1 + 1 = 2, but that if you study it logically speaking, then that's just a theorem of some theory of mathematics, and you can engineer it. And most people don't know that you can engineer mathematics in a totally different way. So is it somewhere out there in the world that we are discovering these things, or is it something that we project again onto the world? Does mathematics exist? It's another question about existence. You can imagine all sorts of questions about this. Your questions now.
Have you considered everything that you've mentioned and how important it is today with disinformation, misinformation, large language models, and AI?
I would love if I had the short answer for that one, but it's just defining the terms you've met, especially misinformation and this and all that. It will require me a lot of time, which I don't have. And I'd rather keep that discussion for the time we talk about knowledge, which will happen in the next few Wednesdays. So next time it'll be about logic, and then probably the time after it, we will talk about how do we define knowledge and what's the difference between data, information, and knowledge and all that stuff. So I'm really sorry to be doing this, but I gotta leave some discussions for another time. I'm really sorry.
No worries. I'm just here to support. I think that you're doing a really good job, and there needs to be more philosophy rooms on Clubhouse.
I certainly hope so. I'm basically done. I have 2 more slides. The importance of studying philosophy. After explaining all the problems, I'm hoping that this is clear for everybody, especially people who live in northern Cambridge. Of course, it helps you develop critical thinking. It helps you explore big questions. It creates connection. I only talk about these topics on my dinner table. I don't talk about the weather. I avoid talking about the weather because I know that there are better things to talk about. And then this friction between you and other people, at least for me, this creates friendships. It creates very deep moments and deep connections, more than talking about our successes. Like, yeah, I took a job and I took a vacation the other day and it was nice and beautiful. I don't like to be talking about this. I'd rather have these discussions, even though they might end up in a fight. I'm not going to avoid a fight just because I'm shy. Right? And then that's my advice. At least that's what I'm trying to preach in these rooms. It promotes open-mindedness, of course, because you are aware that other philosophies exist, and it is very difficult to communicate between philosophies. As I will try to show, this is my personal belief, by the way, this is debatable, but I will. This is my opinion, and I will try to show it in the future. At the end, I'm going to leave you with a wonderful quote by Socrates himself. The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. And again, this is like one of those first quotes. If you think about it for a minute, it sounds deep until you actually think about it. And then it's like, dude, you're saying you know nothing, and then you know one thing. Like, you're contradicting yourself. And if you really know nothing, well, then what use are you for us? Give me someone who knows something so that I can get use of him. So these quotes that drive people away from philosophy, It sounds deep at first, and Instagram is full of these things. It sounds deep at first. Of course, I'm not dissing Socrates here. Socrates is one of the great minds of antiquity, but he is where he belongs in antiquity for a reason, because we've developed since then, unlike the popular opinion. And I'm going to leave you with this meme I saw on Clubhouse. Is the person who put this meme here in this room? Okay, he's not. I'm not going to drop his name then, but he's a friend. And he was using this meme as a PTR. And the meme reads, if you can't read it, how was philosopher, between quotations, how was philosopher ever a job? Lamo. Like, was Socrates sipping wine on a balcony somewhere, drunkenly slurring shit like, to find yourself, think for yourself, with a crowd underneath him screaming shit like, yeah, Socrates, another banger. This man just doesn't miss. And that is how I feel about this quote as well. It's not how I feel about the other more serious domains. So we gotta separate between what the public and what the media and what people who don't really know what they're talking about try to shape philosophy as, and what people who know what they're talking about. It's very hard work. I do it, and I know it's very hard work. So I hope that today I helped you guys discover some corners that you haven't before. This is the end of my presentation. Of course, we're going to stick here for more discussion, more questions, more whatever. Thank you so very much for sticking around with me. This has been 2 hours already. I have not planned to stay that long. I'm really sorry if I've bored you, but I'm really happy that most of you are still here. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Samesh. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I got a quick Socrates joke. He may not have been an alcoholic, but he was forced to drink the hemlock.
The Kool-Aid of his day.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, because some people don't even know the story. Yes, but I get it. It's a good one.
That's really good, Shamash. I really appreciated that too. And the looks this pretty successful room, I would say, for a first outing. So keep up the good work.
Thank you. Wouldn't have been. Where's Ben gone? No, I wanted Ben Tristram. It wouldn't have happened without you and Ben, by the way. So I wanted to thank him, but he left the room. So sad.
Yeah, it's late for him. Of course, it's late for you too. I don't know what I'm saying.
Not really, actually. It's 8:30 right here, so we're fine.
Oh, that's true. That's true. It's not so much that it's late for him; it's family time for him.
Oh
So,
yeah. Then I'll text him and apologize for keeping him here. So this is what we're planning to do. We're gonna open a room every Wednesday like this one. I don't mind sticking around for an extended period of time. I love talking about these things. I can talk for hours, but my aim is to keep it between 1 and 1.5 hours to stay in the theme of the Scientific Discourse group, which I was born and raised in. So yeah, if I discovered that we keep spending more time in these rooms, I'm gonna start engineering it in a matter where we talk about fewer things but deeper. So you guys decide whether you want the big overview like today, or you want to delve deeper in things, but then we have only one topic to talk about. You can let me know with your feedback and everything. I will invite you guys to join the house to get notifications when we go live. Follow John, follow Ben. He just left the room, but these guys are awesome. They open rooms about science, they open rooms about politics, they open rooms about all sorts of things. The weekly philosophy, I'm so drunk now. The weekly Scientific Discourse houses, they are wonderful. They happen every Friday with the one and only John Mallinckrodt, who does his physics lectures. And we have also pharma lectures, we have chemistry lectures, we have all sorts of things. So this is my small contribution to this whole sort of things. Thank you, everybody thanking me in chat. Love you guys. So please join the house. And if anybody has any question or anything they want to share, please just ask permission to go on the stage, or just open the mic and speak.
Hey, Shamash.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
very curious as to how, in your philosophy career, you've ended up on Stephen Toulmin in particular as a particularly important keystone thinker.
Oh, I didn't stumble upon it in philosophy, not at all, but I stumbled upon it in the English department in my university. And then I discovered how influential those words he uses are. They are all over the English departments everywhere. And I got to give the guy credit, right? Like he invaded every English department, every writing course everywhere. And I say every, I don't know really that, but I know it's very common. So the way they teach students how to write English essays is using these terms. What is the argument? What is the warrant? What is the whatever? And so this is why I dropped his name, not because he was so, he broke the ground, but because the words I'm going to be using are his, essentially.
Oh, interesting. So I came across Toulmin in a similarly um, circuitous way. Even though I took philosophy courses in college, I stumbled upon Toulmin separately during my college honors thesis when I was writing about the application of higher level abstractions of evolutionary theories to human cultural, linguistic, and technological evolution. So taking the essence of evolutionary biology models and their mathematical underpinnings, and then trying to come up with a evolutionary paradigm for non-biological systems. And that's how I stumbled upon human understanding. Um, and he was not at the time when I was taking philosophy courses, even mentioned in philosophy departments.
Oh, he is rarely mentioned in philosophy departments because he's a linguist. He has some writings in ethics. So if you talk to someone who deals with ethics, you will find him probably somewhere. But the place he is very big in is the English departments. That's where you will find him. Which again doesn't take away anything from the dude. In fact, it just adds more value to whatever he worked on. And I find it very useful. Most people do actually. This model, calling the fallacies by names and then avoiding them and then saying there's 7 stages for every argument and so on and so forth. Students find it helpful, and at some point this is much more important than whatever gibberish I had put on the logic slide, with the caps and V's and all that stuff. Like, why would you get into that? It looks ugly and it looks very alien. Whereas when I give you a certain story behind what the mistake is, it sticks more in your memory. This is something.
So I find it, I tell a story that I'll tell here in a moment that I'm really comfortable with in terms that kind of covers my epistemology and metaphysics, I guess. And I feel like there's a really hard line. I understand that you can cross this hard line, but I feel really comfortable with it. And I think that most people do as well. So the story I tell is that um, I start out, I shouldn't say I start out, but so I believe in the existence of objective reality. And what do I mean by that? I mean by that not that I have any idea what it is, any idea whatsoever, whether it even involves 3-dimensional space or anything else, but that there is an objective reality out there. And my evidence for that, which I consider just almost ironclad, is the fact that we can do science, that without an objective reality, we couldn't depend on doing experiments and getting, the same results. There's experimental uncertainty and all that, but we couldn't depend on reproducibility that we not only see, but that is absolutely essential for science to work. And so that this works as spectacularly well as it does is, I think, the all but conclusive proof of the existence of objective reality. Now, having told that story, I get that you can pick all sorts of holes in it, but I feel like it butts right up against a pretty hard edge that it's hard to pick holes in without kind of at some point saying that you believe in magic. And I don't know that I only tell that story to kind of wonder what it might elicit from you, Shamash.
Well, I secretly agree with you, But now that now that you've put me in that place, well, let's play devil's advocate, okay? So when you use the word objective, I don't think you're drawing the distinction that you should be drawing, because I think the requirement for science to work is way more than objectivity. What is objectivity? Objectivity is the fact that, or it can be concluded or deduced by, our agreement on the events, on the states of affairs. So this is objectivity. That, if I take this apple from the table in front of me and I eat it, your stomach is empty and my stomach is full, and you can feel the hunger, I can't, and we can communicate this to each other. This is what objectivity is. Before I start poking holes into it, I just want to tell you this is not enough for science to work. For science to work, you need objectivity, plus you need constancy over time. So you need that whatever we've discovered has to stay the same thing. That's how the scientific method works. I'm writing a paper today, I send it for criticism, some other group, they think that my experiment or my conclusions don't align with their conclusions, and so they do the experiment again. But then if inherently in the universe things change, they will reach a different conclusion. And so you don't only need that we all agree on the same reality, but you need that reality to agree with itself all the time, sort to say. So these are two different stages of this is very higher than objectivity, right? It's not only that we all agree, so it's not about our agreement, but in the physical universe itself disagrees with all of us, all of history. We used to believe that the earth is flat for 2,000 years, and now and at the time, if you ask, like for all time until the Greeks, right, until we had let's say until 3,000 years ago, okay, for the entirety of time, ask anybody on the planet, it's flat. But then did the reality, quote unquote, reveal itself later? Did it change at the time? That's a very different discussion than a scientific one. Is just my point. Okay, I'm not sure if this kind of opens any windows for you, John. But there's plenty of ways that the people who want to reject the scientific sort of ideology, or should I say, call it metaphysics now, they can enter from very, very wide windows here.
Yeah, I thought that was a good answer, and in particular when you talked about time, I got to thinking, and this really doesn't have anything fundamentally to do with what you said, but it's interesting to to kind of put a finer point on that particular example. If if the laws of physics, or if things changed rapidly enough, then yeah, you couldn't do science, right? But in fact, things can change, right? Even the fundamental laws of physics, as expressed at least through things like what is the value of Planck's constant, et cetera, right? Those things can actually change, as long as they change relatively slowly, right? There's some level at which it would change too fast for us to ever discover the laws of physics, which would be different from saying that they don't exist. Uh, but but anyway, that's just with respect to changing with time. That gets to the question of, I guess, whether the difference between whether we can discover the laws of physics if they change that rapidly, or if they don't exist in the first place, or if we can do. Of course, the question was, what can we do science? We can't really do science, I guess, if things change quickly enough. But we actually can still, as long as they don't change so quickly that we can't do experiments and see them changing or something like that.
Well, you can do something else. That is all I'm gonna say. You can keep interacting with the universe, but you cannot call it science like we know it today. You're gonna have to factor in that fact. That, you know what I mean? Like if things are constantly, whether slow or fast, they are changing, then you need a mechanism to tell whether your understanding is the one that was lacking, or the universe itself changing. So the famous example is the constants of nature. Are they changing or not? Right? Like I've heard this discussion in a flat Earth room before. That, oh look, the gravitational constant was discovered 300 years ago, and then there's many different measurements for it. Right? I'm sure you've heard it, John, way more than I did. And so if you accept in your metaphysics that things can change, whether slowly or rapidly, then you need to give up on knowing whether it is your theory that was, and your experiment and your technology that was lacking, or it was very perfect what Cavendish did, for example, but then the actual value has changed. You cannot tell the difference. And my approach would be, well, if I cannot tell the difference, then I'm not going to bother. I'm going to assume that, yes, of course, it's changing still, but this is the value we have. And if it, and you take a pragmatic stance, but that again is a philosophical choice. Some people can say, oh, I'm not comfortable with that, in which case they will do something else. They call it science, but it should have a different name, because science takes that pragmatic stance.
John, to continue this exploration into metaphysics, I'm inclined to believe, to agree with you about the repeatability, having being a potentially potent demonstration of objectivity. But if you do that experiment now versus in the first several nanoseconds after the current model of the Big Bang, well, first of all, those experiments may not even be doable, but the results might be very different. In contrast, I think with respect to the long going debate about whether mathematics is discovered or objectively out there, I think regardless of the existence or the values of constants, such as Planck's all of the physical constants that we require to have experiments be repeatable, I think mathematics would continue to be robustly, objectively still out there in a sense. And that's again metaphysical preference on my part.
So you want to include mathematics as part of the laws of the universe. That's what you're a realist, essentially. Am I getting it right?
Platonism.
Yeah, I'll be a Platonist.
Okay, cool. We will do a room about the metaphysics of math and about mathematics, essentially, and what it is. And we will discuss this in great detail. There are essentially 4 different philosophies about mathematics, and I hold the 5th. So I'm a very particular kind of mathematician. Essentially, my professor has invented a 5th choice, and I've inherited it. So I'm going to try to force it onto you people and preach it when we do the mathematics one.
Wonderful, thank you.
You're more than welcome, sir. Thank you. Dude, you had something to say.
The only thing that I thought of while John was mentioning was just like how quantum entanglement kind of baffled the minds of so many scientists and like spooky action at a distance. A lot of people think of objective reality as like an object, like a ball, like a globe or something, but it's probably more of a field than an object. Like the connections between other objects or other animals or other aspects of life. It's always moving. And so the change, I just wanted to say I really appreciated the discussion about the changing nature of objective reality.
Well, thank you. Come back for more. If you're interested, dude, cool, I will recommend once more the Scientific Discourse room, which happens every Friday, and it starts at the same time. We've been doing quantum mechanics for the past 3 weeks now. So if you're, I'm only mentioning it because you brought it up. So this field theory of everything and the way of nature of things and so on and so forth is very generously discussed by our resident physicist. So if you're interested, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, and I don't give him the gears like Benjamin does.
Well, good people, if there is nothing more, I will refer you to the last slide in the presentation. You can find the link for the slides in the very beginning in the chat. If you scroll up, I'm going to try to copy paste it now for you guys to have an easier access. So this is a link to our drive. I will going to post all the slides we're going to do over there. You're going to find on the last slide a link to join our house. a link to the YouTube channel where the episodes will be posted afterwards, a link to the Scientific Discourse YouTube channel, and a link to the slides. So if you lose that link, you can always find it. I'm really thankful, very deeply thankful for you guys to be here today. Looking forward to having you next week. Next week will be about logic and logical fallacies. I'm not going to delve into hard logic. I'm just going to stay in informal. We're going to talk about fallacies. I know John Manning had a question about a certain fallacy, whether it is a fallacy or not, which is very, very authority. And I'm going to discuss this very generously next time. Is appeal to authority always a fallacy, or is it not? Can it be permitted? And sometimes, i.e., as in science. So this will be the topic for next week. Next Wednesday, same time. That is 2 hours and 15 minutes from now. Well, I should say not from now. I should say before now. All right. Thank you very much for being here. And I will attempt to see if my audio settings work. I'm going to attempt to play us out. If you have any other question in the meantime or any other remark, please shoot.
Just another Socrates joke. I would say that Socrates would say, yes, it is a fallacy always to appeal to authority.
That's a better one, actually.
Good one.
Sands of Serenity, Patrick Patrikios, wonderful British Greek guy. Are you hearing the music or not?
No.